AskReddit. Waiters, what Valentine Day disasters have you witnessed? I saw a couple have a full-blown argument in the middle of the restaurant. The woman stood up, took her ring off, threw it at him and walked out. The man continued his meal, had dessert, and then paid the bill, left a pretty big tip for the inconvenience and left. She does this sometimes. Sorry everybody. I once ended up in a burrito place at 2 a.m. talking with a guy who was just casually managing his fiance's drunken breakdown, because she accidentally ordered peppers. The guy seemed tired. 2 failed marriage proposals on the same Valentine's Day. The first one simply said no, I can't do this, and walked out. The second one stared like a deer frozen in the headlights for an excruciating 30 seconds before muttering,
"Let's talk about this later."
They stayed for the rest of their 6-course V-Day special dinner, eating and making painful small talk. I always wonder about couples like this. How could the guy be so off the mark as to not know if his girlfriend will say yes? Do they not communicate? Is she pretending to like him more than she does? These are questions I need answers to. Hey man, don't judge, lots of people make mistakes on first dates. It wasn't disastrous for the couple as much as it was the restaurant. I used to work at a small southeastern franchise restaurant. It wasn't anything you could mistake for upscale. We had someone call in and ask if we could fry the ring he was planning to propose with in a hush puppy. Extremely weird request, but we said sure. They come in to eat with their families. She gets her order of hush puppies, doesn't choke on the ring and seems excited enough. Stayed at the table for about 2 hours total and chatted. They dined and dashed. Edit, had no idea there would be a ton of confusion over what a hush puppy was. In America, or at least the South, a hush puppy is a fried ball of cornmeal. I promise it tastes better than what it sounds like. Also, for all those asking, it was a place called the Shrimp Basket. It's a pretty small franchise. Sorry to break the hearts of all those that were guessing Waffle House or Captain D's. I am a bartender but happened to be the one on the date for this particular disaster. So anyone in the service industry knows, you generally just do not make plans on certain holidays because you will have to work, no matter what. I had not had a date on Valentine's in probably 7 years, so when my boss gave me the day off I was surprised and posted something dumb on Insta about it. I got a DM from a girl I knew but not very well, asking me out for Valentine's and she was way cute, so I figured why the fuck not. Things went so wrong, so quickly. We get to the restaurant, grab a drink in the bar while we wait on our table, took a shot to get the social lubricant flowing since we don't really know each other very well. I pay our bar tab, and we move to the table. To set the scene a bit, this place is a really nice steakhouse and they have these dark red, diamond pattern booths that are fluffy, with buttons at each point of the pattern. The moment we sit down, my date lets out a blood-curdling scream like she had just been stabbed. She grabs her arm and her hand comes away covered in blood, and she looks so confused and I have no idea what the fuck just happened. I look around thinking someone just stabbed her, but everyone around us is seated just staring over at us. I move over to her side of the booth and grab the napkins off the table to find where she is cut. The entire back of her upper arm is sliced from elbow to shoulder. One of the buttons had broken off of the wall and the snapped metal fastener was exposed, so when she sat down her arm ran all the way down along it. She is panicking. I am trying to stop the bleeding, while the people around us figure out what is going on and call 911 for us. The manager comes over and is immediately a defensive asshole until he sees that it was his booth that did the damage. The paramedics show up, I get the owner's info from the manager, and we spend the night in the ER where she needed something like 80 stitches. We both are exhausted at this point, when a guy walks in with flowers, champagne, and a bag of takeout food from the restaurant we had left. It was the owner of the restaurant coming to make sure we could have the Valentine's meal we had missed out on. Sure, it was probably because he was afraid to get sued, but it was still really welcomed after how shitty the night had become, so quickly. She and I ended up dating for almost 3 years and became good friends with the owner. Such good friends she ended up banging him, and that was the last I heard from either of them. Woo, Valentines. I have stuck to working those nights ever since. The end. Edit. I would like to sincerely thank the people going through my comment history and messaging me things like, maybe if you didn't play so many video games like a man-child then you wouldn't get cooped. You guys are making my fucking night and it is hilarious. How dare people enjoy things. I walked up to a table and was about to drop off the bill, caught the end of,
"It's over."
Guy looked at me dead in the eye and said, "Split that fucking check, right now." Not really a disaster, but this guy came in and said he was waiting for his date. He stayed for 5 hours waiting and she never showed. He eventually ordered for himself and asked that I remove the other glass of water from the table. He said it was their first date. At that point, doesn't that make him the waiter? Not a total disaster, but still not good. Had a table of 2 people, probably in their mid-40s last year. Took 45 minutes for this couple to get their entrees due to our kitchen being way too slammed. When they were dropped at the table, they immediately asked for to-go boxes because they told their babysitter they'd be home by a certain time. I overheard the wife say, "Well, I guess this is why we don't celebrate Valentine's Day." The worst part was that they weren't angry, just very sad. My personal feelings about dining out on Valentine's Day aside, I felt so horrible that this couple clearly had put in an effort to have a nice night with each other only to have it go that way. We comped their meals, BTW. Edit to clear up some timing issues. I should have added more context to this the first time but wanted to keep it simple. They made a reservation but unfortunately got seated about 10 minutes late. They ordered a round of drinks while looking over the menu, then a salad course, and then entrees. So at the point their entrees arrived they had already been in the restaurant for close to an hour and a half. A 16-year-old boy proposed to a 15-year-old girl with a cheap ring in the whipped cream of her dessert. She said yes.
So romance isn't quite dead yet.
Don't you know what happens when kids that young get married? It's all romance until the mutual suicide. At least their families might stop their bloody feud.
I was working as a waitress in a sushi restaurant and Valentine's Day was an all-hands-on-deck shift. This guy I had just started seeing wanted to go out, but I told him that working in food service, you never get Valentine's Day off and we'd just have to celebrate the day after or the weekend after. Nope. He got so upset that he went and asked a different girl out, came to the restaurant I worked at on Valentine's Day and sat in my section. He then proceeded to spend the entire evening making a fool out of himself and making his date uncomfortable as he tried to make me jealous. Needless to say, we didn't go out again. Ever.
Saw a couple have a full-on argument at a restaurant. I wasn't their server, but the table was directly in the center of the restaurant and they were certainly loud enough for everyone to hear. My manager kindly asked them to leave and the guy's response was to yell, "I've been wanting to do that shit for 2 years now," and stormed out. It was like a movie. I was bartending at an Italian restaurant, not a fancy one, but still, and it's pretty much full of Valentine's dates. A guy walks in and sits at the bar by himself, looking pretty down. He asked for a whiskey, so I poured it, told him it was on the house because he looked like he needed it. He proceeds to tell me his story. He had come to the city to surprise his girlfriend for Valentine's, about a 5-hour bus trip between cities, and he sure surprised her. She was in her dorm room fucking one of his friends from high school. He didn't know what to do, so he just walked into the first place that sold alcohol. I spilled as much whiskey as he wanted and watched the Raptors with him. Never saw him again. It's cliché, but it happened. Someone showing up for a date and you both realize about 30 minutes in she ain't coming. Drinks on me, buddy. Back when I served food at one of those super touristy seafood restaurants, I worked a Valentine's Day double shift. For lunch, this younger couple came in celebrating their 1-year anniversary. I offer my congratulations and proceed to do my usual spiel before taking orders. The girl is looking more and more dismayed the longer I talk. Finally I get to the end and ask if there are any allergies. She looks directly at her boyfriend and states,
"Yes, I'm allergic to fish and shellfish."
Then looks over at me very sad. I made sure every aspect of her meal was fine for her. But it was that look of,
"We've been dating a year and he still takes me to a restaurant that could kill me."
that really did it for me. Happened to my poor coworker. A guy and his date came in for Valentine's Day. They had a great time, ate a lot of food, drank a lot of wine, and got along really well with my coworker who was their server. About 2 months later they come back in and request my coworker again, who happily says yes to serving them. He goes up and greets them, the guy introduces his wife to him, and my coworker mentions something about how much he enjoyed serving them on Valentine's Day. They go quiet. Wife gets up and leaves, guy just lowers his head. Turns out he had brought his mistress in on Valentine's Day, but my coworker didn't realize he was with a different woman this time around, so didn't think anything of it. We never saw the guy again. Not really much of a disaster, but last year my work called me up, "Hey buddy, we know you're single, can you come in as an extra shift tonight?" You should have replied, "No, I have a date with your wife." He proposed, she said no. He cried and tried to change her mind for 20 minutes while she sat there stony-faced. She finally got up and walked out. He paid and left in tears. Busboy on Las Vegas Strip. An attempted proposal. Dude tries to set up sign with girlfriend's friends for her to show up and see the ring near a fountain. Duck stole the ring, they found it 2 hours later as he dropped in the fountain. She still said yes. Free drinks were given. Was a server at a popular seafood chain that isn't very fancy, but when you live in a town like the one I worked in, that sort of place is the nicest place to go for Valentine's Day. Well, the night was incredibly busy when a couple came in. They were upset after waiting 45 minutes for a table, and they were complaining quite a lot. The woman was decked out in a super nice dress and faux fur coat that was actually very realistic. Well, she was sat and served her frozen drink. She goes to lift the glass to her mouth, and inexplicably, the bottom of the cup simply breaks and the drink is spilled all over her dress and nice coat. Was unfortunate. Younger couple came in for what I can only assume was a first date. Ordered a pizza but never ate, caught up in conversation I guess. Guy must have been feeling confident BC. About 2 hours in he gets up, goes to the bathroom, and then decides to sit next to her in the booth rather than across from her where he was before. I swear to you she then got up and used the restroom about 10 minutes later, and when she came back, decided it would best if they didn't sit next to each other and sat in his original place. Please refrain from doing this. Edit, feels like I've answered 1,000 times, so here, no, there's, in my eyes, nothing wrong with sitting next to your date rather than across. I realize that as long as you're comfortable with it you can do whatever, who cares what people think. The awkward part is that he moved next to her and she decided to move to the different side in response. Long story short, please don't make me watch an unnecessary awkward situation. You can always, maybe, Ask if it's cool if you move next to them before you do it.
I was a waitress many moons ago, and two couples spring to mind. The first were an older couple who were dressed nicely. They were polite and cordial to me, but not overly enthusiastic or friendly. They were at the table for a little over an hour and a half, and we didn't see them say one word to each other during that time. Every time I went over to their table, the atmosphere felt like I'd walked straight into an argument, but they weren't speaking, or looking at each other or anything. It very quickly became awkward as fuck. The second couple was meant to be having a proposal dinner. The guy had rung to book a table, and had let us know he was going to propose during dessert. He'd given the ring to kitchen staff so we could bring it out with a cake, and he'd got some balloons and streamers too. Anyway, he walks in a couple of steps behind his partner, everyone has big grins for them both, but he grits his teeth and shakes his head, surreptitiously dragging his finger across his throat pantomime style. Great. Oh, and lucky me, they're seated in my section. It's obvious she was bloody furious with him about something. She spends the first half of the meal seething quietly, and the second having a constant pop at him. While she was in the loo, the manager made me double check he didn't want us to bring the ring out or anything. Fuck, no, was his response. I felt really bad for him, she really was mean.
A girl that I worked with went to lunch on Valentine's Day at an expensive restaurant her boyfriend had gotten a reservation for. She got dressed up nice, was going on about how sure she was that he was going to propose. He broke up with her. Did she then fall into a deep depression, decide to change her whole academic career, and go to Harvard Law School? A guy proposed to his girlfriend and she said no. The guy threw his arms up and ran out of the building. Later, while waiting for someone to pick her up, she told us it was completely out of the blue, because they'd only been dating for a few months. Another V-Day, a guy raised a huge fuss over the fact that we wouldn't serve liquor to his underage girlfriend. I'm certain you mean he threw up his hands momentarily in exasperation, but I can't help picturing him running out of the restaurant arms straight up Kermit the Frog style. Not a waiter, but I was a pastry chef at this big resort in Cape Cod. We got a special order from this guy who was coming in for his anniversary, Valentine's Day. He wanted his dessert to have "Will you marry me?" written on it so he could pop the question when it came out. He called ahead to the front and back kitchen, even came in himself that morning to make sure it was good to go. The whole crew was behind him. We had cooks all night coming in the ask if it had happened yet. I wrote the inscription on the plate and dressed it to the nines with gold leaf and expensive chocolate. I'm taking a picture of the plate just before it's set to go out and notice our head waiter come in with a weird look on his face. He says plainly, "They don't need it." She broke up with him before the entrees hit the table. I worked at a pretty high-end Mediterranean bistro. My second Valentine's there. It was probably the busiest night I've ever worked as a server. We had reservations that booked basically the entire restaurant including the bar and patio from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. No walk-ins were to be seated unless a reservation was cancelled, or someone with a reservation didn't show up. Most of the customers were pretty understanding and either waited or simply left. One dude, however, kept pushing and pushing, asking every 10 minutes how much longer until he is seated, constantly saying how he is a regular customer, and how his date is going to be there at 7, he got there at 6. We insisted that once a table was available, and all the customers before him were seated, he would get a table, but because the amount of reservations we couldn't guarantee he would even get a table at all. At about 6:50 the guy loses it, fast walks up to the hostess stand where the reservation book is, grabs the reservation book and practically runs out the front door. Now everything is going to complete shit because the only copy of the reservations for the night that is barely half over is gone. Two of the owners ran outside to follow the guy and try and get the book back, but by the time they got out he had already left the parking lot. Even better is, 2 hours later, chaos is still running rampant and the dude shows back up saying he has a reservation for 2. 3 of the 5 of the owners, all brothers, escorted the dude and his date out to the parking lot and banned him from the restaurant permanently. They even took a picture of him and posted it in the window saying, "Do not serve this man." In college I waited tables and Valentine's Day was always a good one in terms of tips. I once saw a couple come in to eat. Halfway through the dinner the man's wife shows up to surprise the couple. The wife took the wine bottle and poured the remnants on the husband's head, took off her ring and told the girlfriend she could have him. He tipped me a $100. A guy did a backflip and asked a girl to be his Valentine. She declined. I walked up to him and asked if he was fine. He said it took him a week to perfect. Had a man and woman sharing dessert and the man playfully put a bit of the ice cream on her nose. She then did the same and he did it back once more but with a different flavor of ice cream. She flipped out at him because,
"You know I like chocolate the most, why would you waste it, you idiot?"
In the end she stormed out cause the man couldn't comprehend how much she was blowing up the situation.
I set my hair on fire and spilled a full Stella on a lady. I work in a casual fine dining steakhouse. Luckily for me, the lady I spilled the Stella on was super understanding and her husband said from across the table,
"Well, now she has to take her pants off."
So that could have gone worse for me.
Tell me, why did you set your hair on fire before spilling on the lady? Just to feel alive? I was the manager of a wings and pizza place with a full bar, definitely not the kind of place you'd take someone for a romantic Valentine's Day dinner, but it was still busy because some people aren't very tactful. We had a guy who had called ahead and asked if we could put a ring in a dessert for him and of course, we obliged. He dropped the ring off the day ahead and I put it in the safe in our office to keep it secure. Fast forward to Valentine's Day. The couple shows up, and they're so obviously in love that she didn't seem to notice or care about the fact that he had brought her to a middle-of-the-road place with a sports bar atmosphere on the most romantic day of the year. They ordered champagne, well, the local winery's best sparkling white, entrees, and it was almost time for dessert. I had used my chef skills to whip up a special chocolate strawberry tart that wasn't on the menu, just for this occasion, because why not try to make their night at least a little fancy? I went to the safe to get the ring, and it wasn't there. I was freaking out big time. I asked everyone there if they knew what the fuck had happened to it. My assistant manager on site had no idea, so I called my other assistant, who also had the safe code, and they didn't know, either. Finally, my bar manager mentioned that one of the owners had been in earlier, and spent a little time in the office. So, at my wit's end, I called the owner. It turns out that he had seen the ring in the safe, and thought it was something a customer had left behind. Figuring that he had come into an extremely lucky situation, he decided, like the scumbag he was, that he'd take it for himself and save money on a gift for his wife on Valentine's. So, I asked the server and bar manager to help stall the couple. The server told them that we were going to do something special for their big date, and to hold tight. I ran out, hopped in my car, and rushed to get the ring from the owner's house, because he was, as I had mentioned, a scumbag, and didn't want to be bothered with bringing the ring to the restaurant himself. The bar manager went over to the table, and did some complicated, tableside cocktail mix that had a bunch of flair bartending tricks and ended with a flaming shot that, once dropped into the rest, made it smoke. I was really disappointed when I heard about all of this because I would have loved to see it instead of breaking a ton of traffic laws on my quest to get the ring. Finally, I rushed back in after about 15 minutes of being on the brink of a heart attack, placed the ring on the dessert, and had their server take it out. At that point, just about the entire staff was watching the table, and when we saw the look on her face, my heart finally started beating again. She said yes. And I started looking for someone else to work for the very next day. Edit. Thanks for the awards, everyone. Operation Scumbag is a success. Eagle has landed. That's all guys, leave down in comments what disasters have you witnessed on your Valentine's days. Thank you. Like and subscribe for more. Peace.